Welcome to the Psychology World podcast. I'm Connor Whiteley, bringing you psychology news, articles, and other interesting psychology-related articles. Where you can find the podcast notes and more interesting psychology-related things, and you can get your free 8 psychology book box set at connorwhiteley.net. Now let's get on to the show. Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 105 of the Psychology World podcast with me, Con Whiteley. And in today's episode, we're talking about 3 new ways to build resilience. And I really wanted to come back to resilience because, as we know, in mental health, being a resilient person is really important. And this also applies to clinical psychology. This is a great topic to revisit because I looked earlier and we've not done this. We've not done this very important topic since episode 54. So we're basically double that now, or we're not that far away. So I thought that this is a really important and also really timely episode to look at, because recently I've been having lots of different conversations with different people about resilience, and we've also noticing, at least in our personal experience, that there just aren't a lot of resilient people at the moment, sadly. But let's hope that this episode can help someone. And it is Friday the 6th of August 2021 as I record this. So, moving on to Psychology News section. So, we're reading from the British Psychological Society Research Digest. So, around the world, people cooperate more willingly with others from their own country. Many of the world's most pressing problems require global cooperation if we are ready to combat climate change or contain the spread of devastating diseases. For instance, we need to work across borders and share resources. So a new study involving more than 18,000 participants from 42 different countries doesn't make for encouraging reading. The team finds that in every single country, participants cooperate more readily with people from their own nation than with other backgrounds. And I will fully admit that I'm an internationalist. I fully believe in cooperation between different countries, and I fully agree this is very disheartening reading, and this is actually quite devastating for someone who really does believe in international cooperation, though. But I do understand this from a social psychology perspective. Yes, in its most basic format, this is just social identity theory and in groups and out groups, which is really disheartening. But sadly, this is social psychology. But thankfully, though, things can improve. And as I talk about in my social psychology book, there are lots of great ways to actually improve intergroup relationships. So even though this is sort of basic human nature, hopefully this can improve. And over time, I guess it has, because if you think back to 100 years ago, then there was nowhere near as much international cooperation as there was now. So over time, this does improve. But of course, that's not helpful when we need to deal with these crises now. I'm not even sure that's the right word. I think it's crises. Anyway, though, so moving on to the next one. New podcast. How has the COVID-19 pandemic affected our mental health? I've got to add this to my podcast feed, actually. Okay, so what impact has the pandemic had on people's mental health? In this episode, Ginny Smith talks to researchers who have been conducting work throughout the pandemic to understand the toll that it has taken on our well-being. Ginny learns about the different factors that can make us more or less vulnerable to these effects, and finds out how pregnant women have fared during these stressful times. She also hears about emerging data that finds bidirectional links between COVID-19 and mental health conditions. And our guests are Dr. Susan Wiskis, completely butchered her name, I do apologise, from the University of Cambridge, and Professor Paul Harrison from the University of Oxford. And I will definitely try and listen to this podcast, but if you want to know, then definitely check this out though. But when it talks about what different factors make us more and less vulnerable, I'm pretty sure that we've covered that quite extensively on the podcast anyway, though. But it's always good to listen to new people. So we're more willing to engage with sexists if we think they are intelligent. And this is the last one. For many readers, the idea of interacting with an overtly sexist person really doesn't sound particularly appealing. I definitely know it doesn't. Yet, in many instances, we do continue to engage with those who espouse sexist views. A new study finds one factor that could determine whether we are likely to engage with a perpetrator of sexism is their intelligence. Participants prefer to interact with intelligent people, even those who engage in sexist behaviour. Yeah, and I do understand that, because I guess that if we think they're intelligent, then I suppose that we're willing to look over those negative traits because they might have other useful information. But still, sexism is just plain wrong. So that's enough of the psychology news section. So let's move on to the personal update. So we're moving on to the personal update, and I do just want to apologise if the audio quality sounded a bit weird in the psychology news section, because when I was recording it, I kept feeling that something was wrong because my headphones were very loud and I usually have them hanging down by my feet because otherwise lots of other stuff happens. And I really should have realised that my microphone wasn't actually connected to my laptop, so even though it was plugged in, I didn't tell my laptop to record from there. So I do apologise, but hopefully it was okay. So moving on to the personal update. This week I really have got to do something psychology related at some point, because this week all I've been doing from a psychology perspective is just more forensic psychology research, which I finished up the police psychology of the interviews bit, and I'm now doing forensic hypnosis, which is a pretty interesting read. And then I've also been working on the coat psychology book. Besides from that, I've been doing lots of other tasks that are not psychology related in the slightest. Basically, all I can say is that I'm having great fun writing this coat psychology book, and I'm really, really enjoying this research, which I will most definitely get done by the end of next week. And then at some point I will write the police psychology book. I really am looking forward to that, because of the research, I can have some very good, fact-based opinions, which is always interesting to read. So as always, I always love to know your thoughts and feelings on today's episode. So you can always email me, connorwhiteley@connorwhiteley.net. You can always leave a comment in the show notes at connorwhiteley.net/podcast. And you can always tweet me on Twitter at sci-fi whiteley. And I've got to start adding here, but you can also message me on Facebook at Connor Whiteley Psychology Author. I've actually got to start making something a bit more official for that. Okay then, but it is a page, not a personal account. And this episode has been sponsored by Social Psychology, A Guide to Social and Cultural Psychology, 3rd edition. This is a great book that came out this year in April of 2021. I really enjoyed writing it, and it's a massive book that is filled with so much great information that I really do recommend, because it goes into the basics, like what is social psychology, and it also goes into the social group, which is what I mentioned earlier in the psychology news section. But then it also goes into stuff like persuasion, the psychology of persuasion, the psychology of a social influence with the Milgram studies, and tons of other great, easy to understand bits that I really do love. So this book goes into great depth, but it's still fun, it's still a light read, and this is not a boring textbook, which is what I strive to do with all of my books. I really did enjoy this. Tons of people have also loved it, so I really cannot recommend this a great book enough. So that is Social Psychology, A Guide to Social and Cultural Psychology, available on all major ebook retailers, and you can order the paperback, hardback and large print versions from Amazon, your local bookstore or local library if you request it. And if you want, you can buy the ebooks directly from me at payhip.com/ConnorWhiteley, and buying it direct is a great way to support authors. Okay, so that's enough of the personal update. Let's move on to the content part of today's episode. So moving on to the content part of today's episode. So we're going to be talking about 3 new tips to help build psychological resilience. And as I already said, this is a great topic that I really wanted to come back to today. Mainly because being a resilient person is really important to help maintain our mental health, and therefore it taps into clinical psychology. But I also wanted to talk about it because I've been having lots of conversations recently with different people about the lack of resilience that some people have, and if you don't have a lot of resilience, then I sort of want to unofficially help you. Of course, nothing on this podcast is ever official. And in this context, what resilience means is that it's the ability or measure of how well a person can deal with psychological distress and the situations that create it. And some people, as we know, are more resilient and can bounce back faster than others. So, 3 new tips to help with psychological resilience. Compassion. This I was definitely quite surprised at first, but just as a quick definition, compassion is our sympathetic concern for others when they're in distress, and it's when we want to eliminate it. And this is a very interesting take, I think, because I never imagined compassion to be linked to resilience, because I know in clinical psychology, we know that compassion is very important for our mental health, but in terms of resilience, compassion is also very important because research has shown that people higher in self-compassion tend to report less distress when they're faced with distressing situations. So this supports what I've said before on the podcast about self-compassion and how important it is to our mental health. Also, if you don't think that you have too much self-compassion, then I think I've definitely spoken about it before on the podcast. So I'm sure if you just go back through the with the backlist, which is pretty big by now, then I'm sure you'll be able to find something on self-compassion. pretty much search any of the mental health episodes and it should be on there, at least like once or twice. Overall, compassion is a great for resilience because when we have the ability to show compassion towards others and ourselves, this can help us be more resilient when faced with situations that will cause us psychological stress. Growth mindset. This one I love. I think the growth mindset is brilliant, mainly because it's to do with a business, but like as a person, a growth mindset is still really important. So this is definitely one of my favourite mindsets. But not only as a psychology student, but also because I want to keep learning and improving, and that's really important. So the whole point of a growth mindset is to help a person unlearn their fixed mindset, because the growth mindset helps a person to foster their passion and their curiosity for learning, and it helps them to embrace risk and choose how to act when a situation changes, and it's the last two that make it really important. Therefore, this is all we needed for effective resilience, as without embracing risk and learning, we won't be able to enjoy life as much as we could. And both of these help us to explore the world, have fun, and take new opportunities, which I'm definitely finding with like psychology, because if you keep learning about psychology, because the easiest way to think about it, and this only is like dawned on me, is that if you have a growth mindset, then you're most probably going to go from a psychology undergraduate degree to a master's, then to a doctorate. And as you keep moving through those different degree classifications, then you're going to unlock more opportunities for yourself. Think of it like that, because an undergraduate couldn't become a doctor of psychology, but a PhD can. Just sort of like that. So without a growth mindset, a person might not be able to learn how to choose or respond effectively when they encounter new situations, leading to possible psychological stress. Because of course they won't be able to respond effectively and resiliently. So I do really encourage you to keep learning, keep exploring, and keep wondering so you can develop your growth mindset, allowing you to become more resilient over time. And the next one I think is probably one of the most colloquial ones that I've done for quite a while. Grit. When I saw that, I was like, really? Grit? Okay, so whilst this is never taught in a clinical psychology, and it is actually quite rare for this to be taught per se in a wider society, but grit is a great skill or ability to have when it comes to resilience, because because a grit encompasses the persistent times when a person has showed lots of perseverance, determination, and dedication. And basically what grit means is basically you do not give up, you keep going no matter what. But then if we go to the more research focused side, like as always, all of the references are available on the website at connorwhiteley.net/podcast, with a grit being a stronger predictor of a person's success compared to natural talent and school grades. And the best way to think about grit is that it gives a person the power to persevere and to carry on in the face of a rough situation that caused them psychological stress. For example, a university student wants to study clinical psychology, but they fail at a recent essay. Some students would be devastated by that, but people with grit would dust themselves off and carry on, probably engage in their growth mindset so they could learn more and not fail on at the next one. And it does take a lot of grit, especially if you've done an essay which you wanted to do really well in, but you only did so well. Definitely learn from personal experience then. So overall, I really enjoy talking about resilience from time to time, because it is important for our mental health and our everyday life. So I really hope that you got something out of today's episode, and I really do recommend checking out some of the past episodes. I know the most recent one on resilience was episode 54. Wow, that must have been like a year ago now. Well, a long time. I really hope that you enjoyed today's episode. If you know someone who would find today's episode useful, then please share it with them. I'm always really grateful when you wonderful people help spread the words about the podcast. And please check out Social Psychology, a guide to social and cultural psychology, available from all major ebook retailers, and you can order the print books in all the usual places. So have a great day, everyone, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to see the show notes, then please go to connorwhiteley.net. And if you want a free 8-book psychology box set, then please go to connorwhiteley.net. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.